We'll give it 1 or 2 minutes to get more people. We see people joining, so let us give it 1 or 2 minutes before we get started. Otherwise, depending on where you are most welcome. It's morning hours for you. Good morning if it's evening hours. Good evening if it's afternoon hours like ourselves. Good afternoon. Yeah, so we start in 2 minutes from now. Thank you once again. I think we can get started. I'll start with a few remarks, then others could be able to join. First of all, really, David and Gina, thank you very much for joining us and coming to talk to us about our tools to create a biodiversity dinner plate. So this webinar, just before we get started, for any of you joining us, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, just letting us know who your names, your center, and your location. That would be very great. Of course, as usual, stay muted unless you want to say something. There will be time for you to say something. But before then, we ask you to stay muted. And then feel free to ask questions in the chat. In principle, we have an engagement time as we move forward with the program. So we will not interrupt the speakers. If you have a question specific to a given speaker, just include it in the chat, and that would be great. We can also do the same using the Q&A. And we also have Vanessa with us. If you have any feedback, share with Vanessa so that we can take that into consideration, not only for this webinar, but also for subsequent ones. As normal, we want to others who may not be able to make it today to be able to listen to, especially that we really have 2 interesting presentations from both David and Gina. So we hope that we have your consent. With this, let me first introduce to you the first speaker. He will be David Obura, who most of you know. He's the founder of the CODIO East Africa, and it's a network that is really a knowledge organization that supports the coral reef and marine systems in the Western Indian Ocean. And David is also the chair of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform organization, on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. David is also on the Earth Commission, and he has been the co-lead of the IPBES Nexus assessment, and has contributed a lot to the development of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. He will be entertaining us in the area of focus of the IPBES, but also exploring the synergies with CGIAR. After David, he will have something like 15 minutes. We will have time to engage through Slido for something like 3-4 minutes. And then we will continue with another presentation with Gina. Dr. Gina Kennedy is the Director of Research, Translation and Impact at the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. And she's also a principal scientist at the Alliance Biodiversity and CGIAR. Gina leads the development and the implementation of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative research and translation strategies, and work closely with PTFI, Centers of Excellence, and other research partners in implementing, translating, and disseminating research findings that advances science understanding and use of the food composition data. She's really passionate with food diversity, and we are talking about biodiversity, really the role of food biodiversity that plays for us to have healthier food systems. So that is what Gina, and she will be really telling us more of how we can get a good understanding of what we eat. What makes a dinner plate biodiverse? It may be as complex than we see the three words. So we will uncover that from the discussion that we are going to have with Gina. After her presentation, we will also have another slide. After the slide, we will continue with interactions. We will give you the floor. If you have any question, we will have something like 10 minutes to 15 maximum for that. And then we will wrap up, and probably we will meet again in a month from now. And we hope it will be in person during Science Week. Having said that, let me pause and give the floor to David.
Great. Thank you very much, Kagele, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's come. Thanks for joining us on this panel. It's a privilege to be here to talk to you from the perspective of IPBES and our contribution. I'll perhaps share my screen now so I can bring up my presentation. And find it. So what I will do is speak about, well, introduce IPBES, maybe familiar to some of you, not so familiar to others. I'll introduce some of our background, but in relation to the work that the CG centers do in relation to food. I've had the great privilege and honor of working with some of you over the last few years, which I'll mention coming up through the IPBES Nexus assessment. And having more discussions around potential connectivity. The title for my talk is The Relevance of the IPBES Work Program under the Rio Conventions, because that's the mandate that IPBES has as an intergovernmental science policy platform. And of course, there are many synergies with the CGIAR work program and priorities. And so I look forward to talking about those. Forward. Now, the three Rio Conventions, these are the three Rio Conventions. I think most of us working in these sectors are quite familiar with them on climate, biodiversity, and desertification. And each has a science policy interface dedicated to it. The IPCC for climate, IPBES mostly to the CBD, and then the UNCCD has what it calls a science policy interface, the SPI. What's important from an IPBES perspective is that we actually are not housed fully under the Convention on Biological Diversity, but to the multilateral environmental agreements in general, and then through them to the UN system more broadly as a whole. So we actually have a memorandum of understanding with 5 of the MEAs. So the CCD is one of them. But then also the Convention on Migratory Species, CMS, the Convention on Wetlands, the Ramsar, and also the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or CITES. And so each of these conventions takes up findings from IPBES assessments. We're most closely aligned with and work through the CBD, but we also relate to the others, and we have programs of work to try and strengthen those interactions. Now, the overarching framework, of course, is the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030 of the United Nations with its 17 goals. I never liked that rectangular depiction of the goals. I much prefer this circle with all of the goals arranged around it, because this emphasizes the fact that it's not about the individual goals, but what's in between that is important. And I think that's also front and center to a lot of the food systems work that you all do. And I think making this more and more explicit in all the work that we do in science to policy is increasingly important with all the crises and the challenges that we're facing around the world. So one of the things that I'm interested in doing as IPBES chair is to try and socialize this more. We have, before I get to that. So this is very relevant to all entities, I think, working in this space. In this particular figure, I've just arranged the various UN institutions and some conventions around the SDGs. So each is hosted under one or two, or maybe relates to a small number of SDGs as priority ones. But it's what happens across to the other SDGs. So from the CBD perspective on biodiversity goals 14 and 15 in the upper left, it's what happens with food production and provisioning, with development and growth in cities and so on, and sustainable consumption that is important in the space in between rather than staying just in our own silos. So exploring this out a little bit further, I think, is important, and making this very tangible for people to understand, so the SDGs don't seem like some distant goals. The sustainable development paradigm, of course, is based on these three pillars: nature, economy, and society. To me, it's not so important. In fact, I think we need to get away from discussions around which encircles the other, because different cultures and worldviews have very different perspectives on this. But we need to really understand what actually happens tangibly when we interact with nature, particularly when we're extracting benefits from nature to economy. The economic benefits are shared in society, but there are various societal influences on economy and down to nature as well. This is where IPBES's conceptual framework is very useful, I think, because this is what we developed many years back, looking at the provisioning of from nature, of nature's contributions to people, to a good quality of life, the direct drivers and indirect drivers that affect nature. But this can be translated into this more generic sort of sustainable development figure, I think, looking at nature, use and extraction, and people and well-being. We can put various labels and boxes from the IPBES conceptual framework onto this. So direct uses and nature's contributions to people, societal benefits to people and well-being, and then indirect and direct drivers going down. And I think this helps, really will help or can help us translate from our science that we do and that we synthesize to the policy interface and the relevance of all the things that we do. So I'll keep coming back to that. So what do we do in IPBES? Our primary outputs are assessments. So since 2016, we've put out these assessments, starting with the pollination and the scenarios and models assessments in 2016. Many of you may, of course, have been involved in some of these. In 2018, the regional assessments for Africa, Europe and Central Asia, the Americas, and Asia Pacific, as well as the land degradation report. Then in 2019, our signature report, the Global Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And then since then, we've done some much more focused assessments. First, these two workshop reports during the COVID pandemic. So these don't count as full assessments, but have been pulled together through IPBES infrastructure on pandemics, and then with the IPCC on biodiversity and climate. And then in the last couple of years, the sustainable use and values assessments in 2022, invasive alien species last year. And then now in preparation now, the Nexus assessment. This one is looking at the interactions between biodiversity, water, food, health, and climate change, and transformative change. And these should be coming out in December this year. They're about to go out for their final review processes in the next few weeks. We're busy cleaning up the assessment reports now, and the business and biodiversity assessment next year. I'll come back to Nexus assessments towards the end. We have some upcoming assessments, and this, of course, is where we really look for interaction and contributions from the scientific community. So the next two assessments on monitoring in 2026 will be due, and spatial planning and connectivity 2027. These are specifically requested through the CBD and the Global Biodiversity Framework processes to support Target 1 in case of the spatial planning and connectivity, and then the monitoring framework for the monitoring assessment. We're starting up the processes for the second global assessment now, where the scoping report is being reviewed now and will hopefully be approved at the end of this year, and it'll come out in 2028. And then we have a last fast track assessment. So our fast track assessments are 2-year assessments. So they don't take quite as long as a full assessments, which take 4 years. And we have yet to determine what the topic will be. We've had a number of suggestions from countries through the CBD and the subsequent processes in Nairobi a few weeks ago, and we'll determine that next year through our plenary processes. We do a few other things as well. We have a number of task forces. So these undertake ongoing work and so provide support to the assessments. So capacity building, there's a lot of work with all of the assessment teams and with fellows and early career professionals. It's a great program run through a TSU, a technical support unit. We have a task force on indigenous and local knowledge, and this really anchors the work that IPBES has been very well recognized for over the years, which is engagement with indigenous and local knowledge, involvement of indigenous people and local communities, and really raising the bar on inclusion and equity, not only in the findings of the assessments, but also in the process of the assessments and what we do. The knowledge and data, a task force on scenarios and models, and then some work on policy tools and methodologies, which we're reviewing at the moment to see what the most effective work will be in that. And then there's a number of other ways to engage with IPBES's work, and this, of course, might be worth discussing and exploring for the CG centers. Now, we have, as an intergovernmental platform, everything has to be approved by our plenary. So our governments come together once a year. So we need to identify work for our work program, propose it, have it amended and reviewed and so on, and then it comes through. So we have collaborative partnerships that have been approved with 4 UN bodies, so UNESCO, FAO, and UNDP. We have a lot of work that is supported through national and regional platforms and networks. National focal points rely on these networks quite strongly and animate them, and many of the collaborative partners support that. We do have stakeholder networks that are self-organized because of our strong interest in not just biodiversity, but ecosystem services. And of course, people are you don't have ecosystem services without the people using or wanting those. We have invested a lot in stakeholder networks. These 2 are self-organized, an open-ended network of stakeholders, and then one focused on indigenous and peoples and local communities who come together. We always have a stakeholder day on the first day of all of our plenaries for our stakeholders to meet each other, engage with the experts who are present, and also the national focal points. And then lastly, we have a group called Supporters, and this is a website or a page on our website which can be explored, and there's listed quite a number, I mean over 30 or 40 collaborative supporters who have helped IPBES one way or another at different times. That might be quite closely defined around an assessment, or it might be broader. We also have a long-running relationship with the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Net program in UNDP. CABIS is a funded project that supports work in West and Central Africa, particularly in Francophone countries, which is a gap. So they're quite supportive. And then I put question marks because perhaps this is an area for further exploration. So coming now to a bit more of the content. The other main, apart from the conceptual framework, the other principal framework which we use and have developed in IPBES is the nature's contributions to people, to be broader than ecosystem services, and be inclusive of cultural gifts from nature and different values and perspectives from around the world. This is a figure from the global assessment that shows that almost all of the contributions from nature to people are in decline, except for the 3 that have been historically monetized, traded, and maximized over time. So that's energy, food, and materials. And in fact, it's the maximization of provisioning from these 3 NCP that is causing the decline in nature and the decline in all the other services, which is, of course, a problematic one. Now, the key point of interaction between us with the CG system, of course, is food. And so I look forward to hearing more about that and discussing that. How have we dealt with food and food systems and assessments? Just a quick overview now, because I knew I wouldn't have much time. The values assessment on the right, of course, really explores the multiple values and perspectives from different cultures around the world. The incredible diversity of nature, but also of people, value systems dependent on location and local biota, the importance of culture and choices. The sustainable use assessment looked at just the use of wild species, so not agriculture and domestication, but of course, many of the wild species, the practices that are involved in harvesting them, and then the uses around food systems, of course, are an important one. And this image on the right here, I sort of Fisheries Congress earlier this year, and so had a look at how the global assessment initially addressed fisheries. And so there were 15 statements in the key messages and background messages in the summary for policymakers focused just on fisheries, so not including other food systems as well. So in relation to fisheries exploitation being the largest direct driver of decline in the oceans, and causing rapid and accelerating decline, that no scenarios with positive outcomes for biodiversity and ecosystem services can occur without transformative change, the importance of governance, and the existence of silos creating the challenges, and of course, indirect drivers driving this overuse. The sustainable use assessment had 11 key examples of sustainable use from around the world, and 4 of these involved fisheries. So I thought that was very interesting. The Nexus assessment. Now, I was a co-chair of the Nexus assessment, which I really enjoyed before becoming chair of the platform. And this was looking at the interlinkages between these 5 elements. Of course, food being one of the most important ones that has a subchapter in the assessment. And it's being led by or co-led by Fabrice de Klerk, who I'm sure many of you know very well. Generalizing out from that, I like to look at it as a mini SDG linkages assessment, because you can attach each of those to one or more SDGs. And so the potential for generality from this Nexus assessment and looking at not just food systems, but any sector of use in society around nature, economy, and society together. And what we're trying to target with this assessment is to generalize from specific nexuses, but then also have actor-specific recommendations and response options that are tangible to people that can be used, such as in agroecology, in diet choice, in terms of soil and other biodiversity and food systems. This really builds on the work that you all have been working on as well, and leading into the transformative change assessment and how to get all of these changes to happen. So my final slide, I just finished with some thoughts on potential interactions between us in terms of IPBES and the CG system. Of course, the participation of experts in assessments and task forces is really important to us. That's as scoping experts, as authors, as well as reviewers. All those roles are critically important to our process. Supporting the national focal points and the national regional platforms. Your institutions are spread around the world and, of course, have great reach in the areas in which you work. The rollout, promotion, and adoption of findings and outreach. We're trying to invest a lot more in that, how to communicate findings to regional and more localized contexts, and doing that through partners. The immediate assessments that are coming out in Nexus, transformative change and business and biodiversity. There's no longer a chance to really interact for review with a Nexus assessment. There is with transformative change. It'll come out in about 3 or 4 weeks. So please do look at IPBES's website if you'd like to review that. Business and biodiversity is coming out for review as well in a few weeks, and that also will include a food component. And then in these upcoming assessments in the coming years, as review or contributing in the review processes, as contributing authors for some of them, or as full authors in those that are taking a bit longer to start up. There's plenty of interaction there. I'll just mention 2 last things, if I may, quickly, because I know my time is up now. I have participated in the Pooling Collective Intelligence or Montpellier process, one of the initial meetings about a year ago now, or a little bit less. And I think exploring how to share information and resources and knowledge in the sort of pooling collective intelligence is something I think that will be really interesting to push forward. And then at COP16 in Cali in Colombia coming up, of course, that's home to some of you and to CIAT. Maybe there's some potential to collaborate and to work together on some of the science that is brought to the COP process. So thank you. I'll finish with that.
Thank you very much, David. I do believe colleagues have learned a lot, and we can move to Slido. I have my colleague Gina and Kristen. One of them will put the Slido, But before they get really highly appreciated because it shows a lot of opportunity, especially the interconnectivity you mentioned about nature, economy, and society, and how we value some of the ecosystem benefits like energy, food, and material, and how that impacts on others. I do believe great opportunities for collaboration. And looking forward to this, let me hand over to my colleagues for the slide.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen and working with Cargill in the EHB platform doing knowledge management. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, David, for your really interesting presentation and really inspiring to hear that you guys are prioritizing Indigenous knowledge and really setting that bar on inclusion and equity. I think that's really cool. And so, yeah, Vanessa has helped us put up the Slido. Please join either through the link in the chat or going to slido.com and adding in the number. And we'd love to hear, as we want to engage and create a discussion off of what David has presented, on how you all, as CGIAR mostly staff, would like to engage with the IPBES assessment processes that David helped explain. So we'll just give a minute to allow people to respond, and then we'll read aloud some answers and send these out to you guys afterwards as well, so that you guys can see and be held accountable to the things that you're committing or hoping to, for how you can commit to engage with the IPBES assessment process. So we have co-authoring, contributing author, and expertise. That would be great. I'm sure David would appreciate that. We have a question which we will help answer later on in the Q&A after Vanessa presents. After Gina presents, my bad. Yeah, more contributing authors, reviews, sharing experiences and case studies. Great. Thank you. Please continue to send in answers. And with that, I think we'll move on to Gina's presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kristen. Colleagues, continue inputting to the slide, though we will take that into consideration and share with David for any further interactions. This is just the starting of a long journey, and it's not even the starting, it's the continuation. So let me hand over to Gina.
Thank you so much, Cargile. And also, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all colleagues who have joined. Can one of the facilitators help to let me know if you can see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay. Let me try and change my view because I'm not seeing the slides myself, which is strange. And so therefore, I don't know how to advance them. If anybody can help me out on what to do with my view.
It might be easier to exit the share screen, and we'll have to do it again. And sharing the screen again, we share it without the presentation mode so that it doesn't take over the whole screen.
Okay, say that again. Stop sharing.
Stop sharing, exactly. And also in the presentation, go out of presentation mode.
How do you do that?
So right now, do you see the whole presentation or just the PowerPoint?
No, I see all of us, like the Brady Bunch screen.
Yes, so if you go back on PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll go to share and I'll share my window. Okay, now it appears very small for me. Oh, strange. So, and of course, colleagues, we apologize because we did practice. We practiced for 20 minutes before everybody got online. All right, I'm gonna try one more time, and hopefully third time makes it perfect.
Yeah, so before sharing, if you go on PowerPoint and exit presentation mode on PowerPoint, so that you can see where you can.
Before sharing.
Yes, all before sharing.
Okay, so I have hit share, but you're saying don't hit share. First, go to
PowerPoint.
Go to my PowerPoint. Okay.
And exit is, do you see presentation mode or do you see it as an edit mode?
Well, now my PowerPoint, I mean, I'm using two screens. So now my PowerPoint is in regular mode.
Perfect. So now you can go and share the screen now, and you should be able to present it this time. So we can see your screen now.
Yeah, okay, it's not in large mode, and I think when I turn it into large mode, well, let's just see what happens. It's some weird glitch now
No
with
worries.
Zoom that
You try again. If it does not work, then someone we will try to present to share.
okay, I think we've got it now. So thank you for bearing with me. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I think it's a technology and age related issue. So apologies for that. So
it's technology.
Yeah.
Nothing
All right.
else.
We are good
great.
to go. We're good to go. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. And I just retained the title of the entire webinar because I think it's so perfect for the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, which is tools to create a diverse dinner plate. So that really is one of the main visions of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, is to work on world's edible biodiversity and understand it in a much deeper way, both from a systems perspective. And so I love this graphic. We're writing a paper right now that is taking this theme, an integrative approach to biodiversity across food systems. And so I just want to emphasize at the very beginning that diversity is really the star of our story. And we're trying to be also very encompassing of many different ways to think about diversity. And I think this slide does quite a nice job of helping us think at all the different levels of diversity that we can be thinking about, talking about, and then, of course, eventually trying to measure and also trying to connect. We're really a project that's trying to make these new linkages in this new scientific frontier, which is based on omics techniques, which really allows you to dive much more deeply in our understanding of particularly food components, but also linking that to soil and health components also. So in this slide, you can see many different concepts of diversity, soil microbial diversity, agroecological diversity, cultural diversity and how we interact with our food systems that are around us, as well as diet diversity, maybe food functional diversity, again, cultures around diet and food, and then finally our diets, the food that's on our plates, and even how that interacts with our gut microbiome and other things that we're just beginning to explore. So that's like theme number one, is diversity is the star of our story. And then point number two is really the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is really about a paradigm shift in how we think of food. We like to joke that, I mean, we're nascent. Our project has been operational for 3 years. And right now in the nutrition science, we have a food label, and our food label is talking about protein and carbohydrate and fat and essential micronutrients. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what we've studied in nutritional science really for the past 100 years. But now we're looking toward the future, and we have these new techniques, and we really feel like we're going to be able to get ourselves like way beyond this kind of protein, carbohydrate, fat, micronutrients into a new space where we're trying to really understand all the phytochemicals and specialized metabolites that actually are essential for our health. And where do those come from? They come from consuming the diversity of foods. So we want to break this mindset that it's just a few things that we're concerned about in nutrition. And we also want to break the mindset that then ties back into agriculture and all the work of the CGIAR, that it's only a few crops that we're concerned about. We are just needing to move way beyond because of climate crisis, because of health and diet-related non-communicable disease crisis because of micronutrient deficiencies. We need to move way beyond rice, wheat, maize, soybean, and that kind of mindset of, you know, these grain productions. So in order to help stimulate that, a paper was published by Andy Jarvis and many others in 2024 of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative inspirational food list for how we want to try to contribute to the body of knowledge on the world's edible food biodiversity. It has 1,650 foods that were nominated by external experts and also taking into consideration important lists. And I think what's super important for me, at least about this slide, you can see that it's plants and animals and insects and aquatic species. But what's super interesting is of these curiosity of experts around the world for 1,650 foods, we know about 362 are reported in the USDA Food Data Central, which is like one of the global go-to spaces for food composition information. And even if we look to Food and Agriculture Organization, they've also been working in this space, you know, for decades. And we have 405 of the species in any FAO list or any knowledge about them. So there's a big, wide open space for us to understand more about our world's food biodiversity. And so at the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, our 3 driving research questions, I'm the director of research for the program, are what is in the food we eat, and how does that composition, that food composition, vary based on how the food is grown, and then what are the implications of that for people and planet. And another thing that I think is super important and is why I wanted to join this project and contribute to it is that we're very dedicated to creating a global ecosystem. So a lot of these technologies could be run out of labs at UC Davis, or we're partnered very strongly with Colorado State University and never extend out to the rest of the world. But the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is really intentional about making a global ecosystem. And so a lot of what I do is interact with our 9 centers of excellence, and you can see those on the map with the star. So they're in Ghana and Ethiopia and Colombia and Mexico and Thailand and Fiji. And then we also have national labs that we're partnering with, such as National Institute of Nutrition in India, and a lab in Japan, Chinese Academy of Agriculture Sciences in China, and so on and so forth. And this is a global ecosystem that we're hoping to expand. So basically, what are we doing at the Periodic Table of Food Initiative? We're providing these 3 foundational resources. One is analytical laboratory tools to explore a lot more deeply what's in our food. And for those of you who are geeky and want to know, we have different platforms such as metabolomics, lipidomics, glycomics, ionomics, proteomics, and these are helping us understand and explore much more deeply bioactive compounds in foods, fatty acids, amino acids, fiber structures, minerals and heavy metals. And then we take the data that's generated from these tools, and we're putting it in an open access database that's free and openly accessible. And I would love to engage with any colleagues. I heard Indigenous peoples and traditional knowledge mentioned. We're trying to be very intentional in our database about, we want to kind of apply local context, and we have a system that we won't put up any data unless we're sure that it's gone through different protocols of national compliance. So our database is open access, but we also want to do that correctly. And then we have a big training arm, which is called Food EDU and Good Food Fellows. So I like to just walk through this example. For years, when I was with Biodiversity, before we became the Alliance of Biodiversity and CGIAR, I worked on Pro Vitamin A banana. And so I like to use the example of a banana, but this just helps us like be real and practical about what is the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. Our first question, what's in food? What's in a banana? So of course, we're gonna not throw out what everybody wants to still know. We all still wanna know that food label, right? So we're gonna look at protein, fat, carbohydrate. We're gonna look at micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, mostly using standardized techniques. And then we're going to really deep into secondary metabolites. So these are all the bioactive compounds in foods. And this is, I think, where the future is going, because these protect us from developing diet-related non-communicable disease. And it also gives us a link back to agriculture. Like, why is the plant making these? Is it helping the plant protect against pests? Is it doing anything else beneficial for the plant? How is it related to soil? So that's like the space that I think is super interesting for us at the CGIAR. And then the other interesting space that interacts with the CGIAR science is the exogenous biomolecules. So we're hoping to be able to also detect in our food pesticides, antibiotics, fertilizer residues, as well as some other things that enter into the food that we consume through our food system processing and packaging. And there's just so many questions that we could look at. But so that's what we're looking at, what's in food. And again, these are the different platforms that labs can run. And I think where I'd like to draw your attention to is the table on the right, that in traditional food composition databases, we can like maximum get 1,500 compounds or food components. And with this suite of tools, you can get 2,000. I think it's actually way beyond 2,000 active components in our food. Really kind of blows your mind. And then instead of looking at, just 450 species, we want to look at thousands of species. So those are the real two things that we're trying to do. So back to my banana. Now we know that it's not just what's in a Cavendish banana. Yeah, we kind of know that. What type of banana are we looking at? And we've known since the 1990s that the cultivar of banana, and you can think variety or breed for other species, is very significant in terms of what's in that food for us. And so this is just a slide that's showing you it's very blurry, but it's showing you the carotenoid content varies by 10 times the amount of carotenoids that turn into vitamin A. That's an essential micronutrient for us as humans. And so we've known this for a long time. And so this is just an example of how the Periodic Table of Food Initiative can help expedite. We've known that about banana for a long time, and I haven't seen much done about it. But this is an example of, this is our ionomics platform. It looks at 26 minerals and metals, and you can see differences in the minerals and metals that show up by variety. So the columns are varieties of apples, and the colors are minerals and metals. So just to say, we've known for a long time, but the Periodic Table of Food Initiative can run all these 26 minerals and metals in one run. So it will reduce the cost. All right, I should have done Slido, but I wasn't prepared with the team. Not all green vegetables are the same. This is another big thing that we're learning in the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. And so just quickly in the chat, which of these green vegetables do you think has the most unique food components? Is it broccoli, B, green pepper, C, spinach, D, green leaf lettuce, or E, okra? Just put your answer in the chat. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move forward and reveal the answer. It's actually broccoli. So when your mom or dad said, eat your vegetables, eat your green vegetables, eat your dark green leafy vegetables, they were saying that with good science now that we can show behind it. There's 973 unique biomolecules in broccoli. And what is really just getting us so interested and curious is that only 202 of the biomolecules are common across these dark green leafy vegetables. So me as a public health nutritionist, I've been grouping all the dark green leafy vegetables for years as one, that counts as like one food that you ate, this group. And now this is showing us, wow, once we start to explore these unique biomolecules, maybe that celery with 508 has certain fibers that are really good for our gut microbiome. Or maybe that asparagus with 201 has certain antioxidants that are really good for brain health. It's all there to be explored. It's super exciting. Now I wanted to, I'm not sure I'm going to take the time to try, because I bungled so badly, my apologies, my getting started. This is just another example. We've mapped 100 flavonoids found in foods with almost 100 of our fruits and vegetables in our database. And this just shows you the linkages. And so, for example, if I were to take my favorite flavonoid, and you can choose your favorite one, such as rutin. What does rutin do for us? It's a powerful antioxidant, it's an anti-inflammatory. It strengthens the vascular structure in humans, and so it prevents cardiovascular disease or improves our cardiovascular health. And then I can scroll over to rutin, and then I can see which foods are rich in rutin. In this example, I think it's basil, and it's an interactive example. And if we have time at the end, I'll be happy to show it, but I just don't want to take it now. But that's just another example of how we're trying to translate our data. And then this really gets into an intersection with what David was talking about, which is we don't want to just stop at the food composition information and generate a food composition table, which we could do, and that would be super exciting. But no, we feel like there's this opportunity to push it forward and really link it to agriculture, really link it to climate. So right now we're and to culture and to economics, and we need help because it's a lot to do. So right now we're working on a regenerative agriculture module. We're pilot testing it in Ghana and Ethiopia and in Kenya. And we're trying to look at practices of where these foods are grown, under what conditions. Is it monocropped? Is it an agroforestry? How much pesticide was put on there? What are the different practices that the farmer's using? And this is just, an example of what we have known, again, that there's significantly higher concentrations of, say, a toxic metal like cadmium, depending on how the food's produced. So again, thinking back to ionomics, okay, we're going to be able to really rapidly generate more data on that type of information. And then to your point, David, we just want to make sure that we're linking this back into why it's important for people, because unless we get people on board, we're really not going to make the transformational change. So this is just, again, banana. Why is a banana an important crop for people? And we can see the many reasons, not only that there's so many cultivars to choose from, which make everybody happy. There's so many dishes, so many recipes, so many ways we use banana plants as plates, as decorations, as food storage vehicles. So trying to tap into all of that. We do have a Good Food University that is developing course curriculum for people who want to learn a little bit more about what is all this. It's going to be very practical, and it will help you understand what are these PTFI platforms and why should I care. So yes, maintaining biodiversity is a universal principle, and we're trying to learn across agriculture and diets and foods and plates, like our dinner plate that we're talking about. Again, this is very similar. This is one of our research projects that's looking at the intersection of soil health, what's in our food, what's in our microbiome, and what's in our serum. So biomolecular markers of the food that we eat, that's linked to the soil. And then I think that this is fascinating, the connection between the sciences that are exploring the soil microbiome and the gut microbiome. Are we asking similar questions? Is there space for co-learning there? I think that there is. And you know what is like a central theme? Diversity is important. We want a diverse soil microbiome. We want a diverse gut microbiome. And then we know things that actually detract from that, like antibiotics and pesticides. So I think that's like another fascinating exploration. So I hope this is stimulating you to try and get involved. Just like David said, we're growing our ecosystem. We want everybody to be a partner. We're so excited to work with you and talk with you. So what can you do? You could visit our website, and we have we have updates that will be on our website. And I think that there's plans for a newsletter. We have the data of the first 500 foods in the database that's called Marker Lab. So you can also go to the Periodic Table of Food Initiative website and try and register for Marker Lab. It's free. Once you freely register and agree to the terms and conditions, you can explore the data. You can apply to become a Periodic Table of Food Initiative lab if you would be so interested. There's an application out right now. There's a data exploration challenge. And then you can also write to this email, foodedu@heart.org. We partner with the American Heart Association, and you can look at the first modules of a course called Foodomics and Society. So those are the ways to get involved. So I'm going to stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gina. It's really showing how your presentation on the periodic table of food systems is quite interrelated to what David shared with us. We clearly understand that maintaining, enhancing, and restoring biodiversity and ecosystem services, having a good understanding of the soil, the water, and the land where we grow our crops inform a lot the quality of what we eat. Thank you very much for that. I guess we will have limited time for engagement, but let us first take the Slido. Then we will take another comment. Otherwise, everything that is in the chat, we will share with you, Gina and David, and then you will give us feedback that we can share with our colleagues. Thank you. Let us go with the Slido.
Yeah, thanks for presenting, Gina. Who knew that broccoli had so many biomolecules? So we would like everyone to respond with which opportunity crops do you want the Periodic Table of Food Initiative to prioritize for nutritional assessment, as everyone comes from your own centers and has different expertise in different types of crops. Which ones do you think are the most important to learn more about? Seaweed. It's a new one. And of course we have potatoes and liver. African leafy vegetables, cocoyam and taro, all fruits. Yeah, so maybe Gina can get back to people on that, volunteering you for that. Do we want to move to the Q&A then, Cargill, because we only have 8 minutes left?
Exactly. It's what I was going to suggest, that colleagues can continue with the Slido. We will be able to harvest the information and share with Gina. Now we have something like, I'll just say like 5 minutes to engage if there is any quick comment from anyone. Otherwise, let's see if there is someone. Otherwise, there is a comment in the chat, Gina, which could be also interesting, but let us see. So as I said earlier, you can raise your hand and then we unmute and be able to make your comment. Yeah, as we wait for colleagues, there was a comment, Gina, in terms of why there was no much mention about cereals. I don't know what you can be able to share about that comment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Innocent. So at the moment, we have 500 foods in the database, and there are, of course, the common cereals that you would expect to see. There is analysis of rice, there's analysis of wheat, there's analysis of maize. So we're not forgetting cereals or tubers. In fact, again, we have many sort of small research projects ongoing. One of them is on potato, and colleagues have taken different potato varieties, including purple flesh potato, and run this analysis platform that we call metabolomics, which looks at all the specialized metabolites in the different that come out of the food. And so that research will be up and coming shortly. It takes a while to do the annotation of all the metabolites and then get it uploaded into the database. But we're definitely also looking at potatoes. And in the first 500 foods, I think you'll find, some entries of certainly maize, rice, sorghum. I don't know about sorghum, maize and rice, wheat, and potato, but we are expanding that. We have another collaboration with Washington State University, and they're looking at different varieties of quinoa. We have a collaboration with Future Seeds in CIAT, and one of our centers of excellence in Colombia, which is called IPBES. and they're looking at 35 accessions of common bean and then accessions of lima bean and tepary bean. So a lot of work is kind of ongoing. And again, we had to develop all the standardized platforms and technologies, and then get centers around the world to be equipped to run them and trained to run them. And now we're really at the beginning of doing all of our analysis. So if you have ideas of which centers to partner with, we would love to hear that also.
Great, thank you very much, Gina. And I will have probably one or so myself to David. You talked about interesting opportunities for engagement and especially for the reviews. And sometimes we miss the opportunity because we don't know from where to start. So how can colleagues engage with the assessments, how they can access the information and know that there is something that is coming and they can engage just to find out, just being curious?
Yeah, thanks, Kagela. That is a challenge because, of course, there's so many different things to find out about all the time. But what we do have, there is a place to sign up on the IPBES website if you go to it. And I realize I should have looked at exactly where it is, but you can sign in to receive the notifications. And we send out notifications for all of the assessments and review processes and requests for author nominations and things like that that are coming up. So that's the surest way. As institutional processes, I mean, maybe it makes sense to have, one or two communicators in various programs sign up so they can then circulate relevant things to their teams rather than 100 or 200 different people signing up. So that's certainly the best way to know what's happening. And then, of course, the more individuals are engaged in various processes, of course, the more they will be able to tell people of things that are coming up.
Excellent. So thank you very much, David. Thank you, Gina. Thank you for colleagues for participating in this webinar. We were very happy really to have the two. David and Gina, we wish you could also join us in our next webinar, which will be now in person. That will be on the 5th of July here in Nairobi at the UN campus. This is an extension, really extending the invitation to you, because there is a lot to learn. Probably there is a lot of questions, and people will need to digest your presentations and be able to have an interesting chat with you if you can make it to our side event on the same date. With this, really, thank you very much. I do believe there is a critical, interesting take-home message, the interlinkage of the two, especially your great work, David, with the aquatic food systems and linking it with what Gina is doing with the crop plants and probably integration of animal foods in the future. The majority of the things we do, we would find out from as we meet in Nairobi. And these are really great opportunities, and we look forward to having you next time. Also, this is not the last time, so we'll be really getting in touch with you for these further interactions. We are trying to make it open to externals, also internal folks within CGIAR. So feel free to join our next webinars. I believe the next one, probably in August, will focus on the national biodiversity strategies and action plans in terms of the accelerators. Then we need to see what is happening with the in-house. Probably we will come back to food now, this time probably talking about the agrobiodiversity index. It has been there for a while, but how much colleagues know about it, how much external stakeholders know about it, there is still room for learning. So with this, I thank you all and wish you a good day. It could be a good day, good evening, or even good night, depending on where you are. And bye for now.